As a young journalist, I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is great. Like, this is how we should do everything, right? We should be digging and researching, go after people of power, put your personal politics aside. And that's the way CNN always was in kind of the old days.
So why didn't that happen with these crazy situations with the Biden family, particularly Hunter Biden? There's documents that show of his all of his dealings with China and Ukraine. I mean, there's books written about this now. Why didn't this happen? Why didn't they ever dig into him?
I have absolutely no idea. I was gone at that point.
Okay.
So I left in January of 2020. So I was gone.
Would you have pushed for like, hey, why aren't we looking into this?
I could have tried to push. I don't think it would have gone anywhere.
Okay.
I mean, I'll be honest.
No, that's all you can be.
I love it.
All right, Christy Lee here, and your name is?
Patrick Davis.
Patrick Davis. And so you're quite the buzz right now because you're the latest to actually join Project Veritas from having worked at CNN for many years. So gosh, what a big step.
It's been a pretty wild ride the last couple of years. I actually left CNN 2 years ago, shortly after the video, a couple of months, but the video had nothing to do with my leaving. I'd already announced that months before.
Take me behind the scenes with that video and what that was like.
When a friend of mine, yes. So Carrie had worked under me at CNN for a couple of years, and we got to know each other. We're pretty friendly with each other, and he'd been hitting me up for like mentor advice for a while, maybe even before the Veritas stuff happened, whatever. And thinking about career change, all that sort of stuff, and I was busy. I was in Florida for a hurricane. I came back. He texted me again. Hey, can we get together? And I wasn't like blowing him off. I was just busy. I went out to San Diego with President Trump. He was visiting the border. I finally got back, and he sent me this really endearing text. And he was getting ready to leave and move to Florida. And I was like, well, let's get down. I'll make some time for you. And so we did. And so we sat down at one of my favorite Irish pubs in a couple blocks from the Bureau, and kind of the rest is history. I would say if we met for an hour, I said, you got an hour of my time. I was meeting another friend for drinks, and I said, you have an hour of my time. And but I would say the first 50 minutes of that conversation was strictly life advice, career advice, how to be a good husband, how to be a good father, how to be a good son-in-law. The last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, turned to work. And, I didn't say anything that I hadn't said 100 times before in the newsroom, with friends, with family. I spoke from the heart. I mean, obviously I would have rather have known that I was on camera. Probably would have been a little more diplomatic, with my words that night. But, that whole thing, it just... I wanted to walk away quietly. I was planning to just kind of, slip away, and I was going to open this little cafe on the water and paddleboard to work every day, make food and cocktails for my friends. And, Project Veritas, I guess, had a Jerry Maguire moment on my behalf.
So you were already planning on leaving CNN when this entrapment situation happened?
Yes, and look, I mean, I didn't leave CNN on bad terms. I mean, I still have, a lot of friends there and stuff, people that I care about. I've worked with them for a long time. There are still some great journalists there. So that didn't really have anything to do with it. I was just kind of done. I'd been there for a long time. I've been in news for a long time, and I'd just kind of seen everything and done everything. And I just kind of was ready to walk away from the news business entirely, and just kind of detox and go start a new chapter in my life. And I'd just gone through a lot of stuff. My dad had just passed away and everything else. It just kind of, changed your perspective on life a little bit. So I just, I went to my boss in the summer of 2019. I was kind of like, I don't think I'm going to renew my contract. And they were very supportive. We were
summer 2019, this is after the video came out?
No, so summer 19, I had very quietly was talking to, my immediate boss and
saying you were planning on leaving.
Right.
And then when did the video happen?
In October of 2019.
Okay.
So
interesting timing.
Yeah, I was 2 months away from walking away. So when James called me the night before the video was released, he's like, "Hey, it's James OKeefe. I've got this we've got you on camera. So, and I knew it was him. I knew he was going to be calling because they had already started dropping tapes a few days before. So I was like, I knew it was happening. So so we talked, and we actually had a really cordial. I wasn't mad at him or anything. We had a very cordial conversation, very professional. We talked about ethics and journalism, and I said, look, I can't talk to you. I'm under contract. I'm going to be loyal through this contract all the way through. I don't have an axe to grind. It had nothing to do with, anything except for I just kind of was done, and I just wanted to walk away. So, and he understood that, and it was just over the course of the next couple of years, we would, kind of banter back and forth, silly text messages back and forth to each other. And one night he was trying to text another employee at Project Veritas, and was like, "Where are you? I gave you an assignment, and you're not here." It was, it was kind of funny, and I was like, "Oh, you got the wrong guy." So, but I said, we've been kind of going back and forth with these smart-ass texts for a couple of years. Why don't we get together and meet, like face to face? Because I think we had a respect for each other that kind of transcended the videos and my being an unwitting whistleblower, so to speak. So we decided to get together, and we just talked about everything: or life, love, loss, heartbreak, literature. We're both boaters, so So we just kind of bonded in that moment, and a couple days later, I was in New York meeting the rest of the team. And
wow,
the rest is history.
This is such a crazy story. Did you feel betrayed by the person that you were here? You were trying to do a good thing. It was goodwill. You're like, here's some advice on life, and then did you feel like you had to have felt like a ping of betrayal? Or
I was not happy with him, and I own my words. I wasn't like upset by what I said. But I considered him a friend. I was there to help him. I mean, I'm a big empath, and so I was just trying to help him, and I had no idea. So yeah, I was upset with him. I wasn't upset with Veritas. I understand, they're journalists that they're doing their thing. I didn't necessarily disagree with the premise of what they're doing. I just didn't like that it was me and the way they went about it. I was like, you could have just talked to me, and after my contract or whatever, then we could sit down and talk. But so yeah, the betrayal, stung a little bit. I had some choice words, but the beauty of life is that I've learned. I've been through so many different, tragedies, stuff like that in my life, that the power of forgiveness does a lot for the soul. Mm-hmm. And so the first time I saw Carrie after 2 years, James was like, he works here, right? And I was like, really? He's like, yeah. So he was actually in New York, for meetings a couple weeks after I'd started, and he walked into the room, and I gave him a big hug. He was like, I'm so sorry. I was like, you don't have to apologize for anything. I was like, you were doing what you felt was right at the time. I forgive you. It's fine. So I just gave him a big hug and was like, it's water under the bridge. We have work to do. We're going to go break some news. We're going to have some fun. So
I got to ask you, are you glad that you left the business in 2019? Because I was still in the business in 2020, and I mean, that's when I feel like the worst of it, like just the worst journalism I'd ever seen in my nearly 20 years in the business. Do you feel like it's a good thing that you left when you did?
The timing couldn't have been better, and it couldn't have been worse at the same time. So I was planning on opening this little cafe, and then COVID hit, and I was like, okay, I'm going to put those plans on hold. So I kind of sat on the sidelines for a couple of years and watched from a distance. Though I did a complete detox, I'd never watched cable news again. I mean, it's extremely rare to turn it on. So I never really made a big deal about my retirement. Like, my coworkers and people around, DC in the business, Capitol Hill and the White House, they knew. My family knew. But I'd still have friends reach out to me and be like, hey, what's going on at CNN? Like, this is crazy. Like this whole pandemic. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I have no idea. There's a virus going around? So I was kind of like, where are you getting your news? I said, Instagram memes. Isn't that where everyone gets their news now? So so I took everything with I don't know, I'm just always kind of playful and lighthearted. And so I guess just after being on the sidelines for a little while, I don't know, I had zero intention of ever going back to the news. I mean, when I left, I vowed I'm never doing this again. But that conversation with James and I in Annapolis that afternoon 2 years later really kind of, got that fire burning again about journalism and the First Amendment. We really bonded on that, the whole freedom of speech and the censorship that's going on with big tech. And it's like everyone's colluding with each other right now, between big government, big tech, big corporations, big pharma, all of it. And I just kind of said enough's enough, you know.
Yeah.
So like I got another chapter in me, and if this is where my past has led, this is where I'm going to be. So
Yeah.
so I said, look, I'll do this for a couple of months. We'll hang out for a little while. We'll see how it goes. And you know, it was hard keeping this under wraps from people. Like the party in Miami, I mean, it was like, you know, there's cameras everywhere and
Yeah.
people's everywhere, and I'm like trying to be as incognito as I possibly
Yeah.
can. So after Miami, and there were some pictures taken, and I know the Rolling Stone article. You know, she had taken a lot of photographs. Well, she sent them in advance, which was great. I mean, that's a really great journalist to say, hey, look, you know, I'm not giving you the whole story, but here's some photographs we're planning to use, and knowing that we have undercover journalists, so we were actually able to let them know, please don't publish this. We didn't.
Oh, wow.
We didn't want it was me and James on stage dancing. We're like,
Oh.
we didn't want that to
Yeah.
be published. So she was awesome about doing that.
That's
Like she
really
understood.
awesome.
Yeah. So she had plenty of other pictures to take, but
Yeah.
so yes, the cover almost got blown in Miami, and then in Rolling Stone of all places. And so he and I got together and we're like, you know what, let's just go ahead and get this done.
Yeah.
Let's just get it out there. So we're like, why not CPAC? Let's just do it at CPAC.
Yeah.
So,
So, have you gotten backlash from CNN or mainstream news, like now that you're joining the enemy, or the journalists that doctors videos? I mean, have you gotten backlash?
So the responses from friends, including executives at CNN and other outlets, because I had friends, kind of everywhere, all over Washington, around the country, has been overwhelmingly positive. They were proud of me. They're proud that I stepped up and said something. They may not agree with me. They may not agree with what I'm doing, but they're all very proud that I've kind of held true to my convictions. I don't know. The whole thing's been kind of a little bit of a whirlwind. I'm still like answering text messages and stuff from old friends that I haven't heard from in a long time. But it's all been very overwhelmingly positive. The funniest part are the comments like in our Instagram, where people think like I'm some plant or some mole, this Trojan.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask next. Like, why should people trust someone that used to work at CNN?
Yeah, that's the hard part, right? People are trying to wrap their brains around like, how can someone at CNN come in, after I was an unwitting. But if you go back and actually listen to what I said in those recordings when Carrie Porch recorded me, if you go back and listen to those recordings and listen to what I said, you'll understand where my heart is. And at the end of the day, I can't really be bothered by, whatever's the field. We're going to keep breaking news and we're going to keep having fun at the same time. We have a mission to do, and we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. So it's one of those things where, I try to just tune it all out. That's not what's important to me. I mean, I want people to, trust what, verify. I get that. People are very protective of, people like James, Project Veritas. But we've got a bond. We're like a very close-knit, it's a really small group of people, and so it's become a very close-knit family for me. And if you look at the stories that we've broken in the time I've been there, child predators and the DARPA documents, I mean, that was a huge story. It was a huge story. And so I oversaw that. I mean,
are you disappointed, having come from mainstream, to see that they ignore these groundbreaking, huge stories?
It is difficult because that was the DARPA documents that should have been picked up by everyone. And we actually were in Washington during the book tour, and we met with some journalists that, they immediately went on. They were attacking, the guy who wrote the major that wrote the letter to the Inspector General at DOD. And they were kind of slamming him and his credibility because he was talking about, ivermectin and, these alternative curatives. And I'm going, you missed the entire point of the story. The point of the story is that Echo Health Alliance actually went to DARPA long before COVID ever happened, seeking money for gain of function where it was supposed to be banned at the time, right? There was a moratorium on gain of function. Not only did they do that, but someone at DARPA made the conscious decision to bury those documents. They were unclassified, but they were put on some top secret shared drive. That's the question, right? So we actually, these people did the reports. Well, one guy wanted to meet with us while we were in Washington, and we did. We sat down for 15 minutes and met with him. And I was like, look, we may not agree politically, but you got to put personal politics aside. That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
Like, the question, you missed the whole point of the story. It wasn't the only reason we talked about the major, he wasn't our source. It was a totally different source. the reason we put that in there is just to verify that the documents were real, right?
Yeah.
We put his letter to the Inspector General in there.
Yeah.
That was all just part of the verification process. We weren't claiming anything. That's the difference with Project Veritas. We don't spin, we don't opine, we don't do any of that. We show the words, or we show the video. The words are coming out of the people's mouths themselves. We're not saying these things. It's the people that we get on tape or the documents. So he went back the very next day. He really enjoyed the conversation, and he went back on his show the very next day and did a whole, like a 10-minute segment on it, which was great. And so that's what we're trying to do. And that, if you saw my speech, we're trying to kind of almost extend an olive branch to people, where it's like, to all journalists around the world, we all need to do a better job, us included. We're gonna up our game. We would like for everyone else to up their game too. Like, let's stop. Like I said, we used to be, journalists used to rush to the podium with a microphone in hand, asking tough questions of the people in power. Now journalists stand in front of the podium with a megaphone, blasting, the public with the words that the people in power want to hear.
Exactly.
And that's not journalism, that's propaganda. So I know that there are some great journalists still at CNN. There are some great journalists at all the networks and newspapers, stuff like that. It's just become this crazy business model where it's like, we're either going to be left, right. Why do we have to be left, right? We're not supposed to do that. As a journalist, I've always put my personal politics aside, and just always focus. You always want to tell both sides of the story. It's what we learned in journalism school. It's what Bernard Shaw taught me. When I was a neophyte at CNN, I was brand new, and he was like, "Look, this is how we do this here. Like, you always get all sides of the story. If there's 3 sides of the story, you got to report all 3 sides." And he was very, strict about that. I knew the man for years, and
now it's suddenly, unless the powers that be declare a side as misinformation, then you can ignore that side altogether. You don't have to have proof that it's misinformation. It's just, if it's classified, just ignore that side. I mean, that was the breaking point for me, was the frontline doctors. You don't have to agree with what they're saying. You can even acknowledge that at this point it looks like it's a minority of doctors that are saying this, but to cheer on their voices being silenced was insane to me. Did you have a reaction to when that was happening?
Yes. When all of this, people were getting banned from Twitter and social media, and just Dr. Malone Dr. Malone of all people, who has he was one of the
architect of the mRNA technology, who has the receipts, who has the documents that are never. It's insane.
And every time he does an interview, it gets banned, right? I mean, he goes on Joe Rogan, and it's like, we're gonna shadow ban it, or they're just gonna delete it altogether. And
he sat on the board for the Department of Defense. He was integral in Ebola crisis, but suddenly now he's a quack. Yeah. All of a sudden.
Yeah. And I actually had a really good conversation with him right before we did. We were doing a story on kids in New York, because there was this rush to get children vaccinated once they approved the children vaccine 5 to 12. But the children's vaccine actually has to be mixed with a certain saline solution. They have to kind of take the dose down a little bit. So I guess just in the rush to get this done, there was some mishaps. And so they were using the wrong mixture with the children's COVID. So who knows how many thousands of kids got injected with the wrong thing. So the day before that story broke, that morning, I had James and I got on the phone with Dr. Malone. We had a really good, long, thoughtful conversation with him. And he's not, I just don't think, he doesn't have an axe to grind. He's just trying to let people know that this is what's out there. We're rushing this into people, and it's insanity what's going on right now.
He's been very reasonable from the beginning, and if anything, this huge attack on him, I've seen the evolution of him become what they would call radicalized, just because the attack on him has been so intense. So it's like it's having the opposite effect than these people realize. So I have
the same attack that Project Veritas gets. I mean, it's like every day it's like, oh, we're not going to, I mean, you can't even tag James O'Keefe for Project Veritas on Instagram. I mean, that's like how ridiculous it's gotten.
And it's like they have no proof that anything that he said is a lie, and he's won like every court case.
Absolutely, and that's the thing is, and even if you look at that children's vax story that we did, that was extremely important, and big media had never picked up on it. I don't know. It's been. We approached that story with such an anti-vax And I mean, not an anti-vax approach, right? I mean, you could think that that's how we would approach it. We approached it from such a middle of the road.
Yeah.
We only presented the facts. We presented the videos, what people were saying and what people were doing. We approached it, and there were comments. We had hours and hours and hours of footage. You got to cut it down, right?
Yeah.
So we cut it down to like 10, 15 minutes, whatever we ended up publishing. But there were some very harsh anti-vax type comments from some of the nurses. People on the front lines are like, we would never get our kids vaxxed and stuff.
Wow.
And we put that stuff on the cutting room floor. I was like, you know what? It's kind of opinion. We're not going to do the opinion side. Like, we're just going to present facts here.
Wow.
We're going to try to keep spin and opinion out of it unless it truly adds value to the story.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're making very strict editorial decisions that people think that we don't make. I mean, we literally sit down and we talk ethics every day about journalism. I mean, our core values and our mission statements posted on our website. I wish every journalist in the world would go back and look at that, because we try to live by those every single day. And I invite anyone who ever catches us, if we ever kind of stray from one of those, let us know. Point it out. We will try to rectify it as quickly as possible.
So something that I didn't know I was going to do, but I've just let God lead me in my independent, breaking free circumstance. Here I am. But something that I didn't realize I was going to do is I just started tracking the mainstream media when they ignore, they sensationalize, they put out things that are just plain false. I started tracking that throughout the week, and I would make notes. And now for months and months now, pretty much every week, I have like a weekly segment I call Media Malfeasance, and I try and make it sprinkle in some humor, but I'm trying to educate and point out, you feel it's happening. Well, here are my examples of how it's happening, how they are gaslighting you, they are sensationalizing here, but ignoring here.
Kind of like the BLM riots, where it's mostly peaceful protests, right? While everything's burning to the ground.
Right. So just pointing out the ironies, the hypocrisies, all of that. And CNN's been highlighted multiple times in this weekly segment. Don't know how that happened, but especially with the cases of all of this. I mean, I in a jokingly way said, is CNN a newsroom anymore, or is it a weird brothel because of all these sex situations? Assault issues, the child sex predator issues. My goodness. I mean, you were there for 2 decades. What was your reaction to all of this craziness happening?
I never witnessed a single impropriety in 25 years there. It kind of blew my mind a little bit that there were 2 guys back to back that were having these thoughts. Well, one of them actually took action, right? I mean, it's I absolutely cannot believe that there's some I don't think there's some secret group. I think at the end of the day it comes down to leadership, and they've been they were straight off course for a few years under the wrong leadership, and he's gone now. It's kind of the I say it's like the epitome of why you don't have an entertainment executive running the world's largest, most trusted news organization, right? We, all that stuff kind of, the wheels sort of fell off the cart, during that era. But prior to that, it was, I mean, look, I remember days where, we went after Al Gore on the money, this whole China money laundering, money scandal that was going on. We called it the money trail. We took 10 of our best journalists off of their posts and put them in a room for, I don't know, months, pouring through documents and investigating, digging, like researching. And it was great for me as like a young journalist to witness this happening. Like, it didn't matter what party they were for. He was getting ready to, he was running against George Bush and stuff, and he was still vice president at the time. And, and I loved, like I said, there's still some amazing journalists there.
And that's the thing, and I think that's great that you keep on saying that, because I say that too. I mean, I've worked with incredible people, incredible colleagues over the years, and so it's only if there's people or colleagues of yours that are like offended, well then maybe they need to ask themselves why they're offended, because we're really not attacking like particular people unless we have a reason. We're attacking a system, a broken system, and we're trying to figure out what happened here, who is coordinating this, who's leading this. So I appreciate you saying that, because I feel the same way. It's nothing against my former colleagues, and it's nothing, you still respect many of yours.
Yeah, and that's, I think all of journalism has kind of fallen by the wayside. There is no true middle of the road media outlet, and I think there's actually a hunger for that. There's a desire for that. There's a reason why viewership is dropping across the board with news. It's because people don't trust it anymore.
Yes.
Journalism today is they always do these polls, right? Gallup polls on trust. Used car salesmen in Congress and all. Like who's highly respected. Military and nurses, that sort of thing. And journalism has dropped significantly, where they're, I think, either equal to or lower than Congress right now, and that's not good. So if the American people don't actually trust anything that's coming out of your mouth, that's a huge problem for the entire country. Like I said the other day, without the First Amendment, without a credible, unbiased Fourth Estate asking the people in power the tough questions and digging and researching and find out what's really going on for the exact questions you're asking, our republic fails. It does. It's so important for us to get back to those roots. And when people talk about James O'Keefe, he's not a journalist. Look, the ACLU came in and stepped up. This Professional Society of Journalists stepped up when the FBI raided his home. That was such an abridgment on the First Amendment. Is that where we're at now? Yeah. We're weaponizing the FBI to come and blowing the doors of journalists. And and then other people are like, well, they're not journalists. I'll tell you, James O'Keefe is unequivocally one of the best, if not the best, journalist I've ever met. His core values and his ethics are beyond reproach. Yeah, in the early days, he's gonna, you might not like our tactics, right? Yeah. And that's the whole thing. You don't like our tactics because the stuff that we uncover, I guess, doesn't align with your worldview. Yeah. But it's not about Republican, Democrat. I mean, we've gone after some Republicans too. I mean, look at Alex, Stovall story. I think it was back in December, out in Arizona. Everyone thinks we're this right-wing, nefarious, organization, and that's really not the case. You walk into James O'Keefe's office. We just renovated the headquarters, and it's beautiful. We redid the whole thing in his office. Turn it around. He has these amazing bookshelves that go up. He probably has the largest, maybe outside the Library of Congress, library of books on journalism that I've ever seen, and it's kind of cool because he's got this little Dewey Decimal System, his own little creative thing that he said, so he knows exactly where every single book is, where he pulled every quote. He's written 3 books now, and so he's used those as his guide his whole time, and so it's really cool to kind of go in there, and he's got his little labeling system to go in, and he really truly cares about journalism. He really cares about the First Amendment and the Constitution and doing the right thing. So anyone who's ever kind of been a naysayer, here I am coming from 25 years of network news, sitting side by side with him on a daily basis, and I can tell you hands down, he is truly a great journalist with a big heart.
Thank you so much. I know that